Good evening, and thank you for allowing me to come into your living rooms. Well, I'm not easily shocked, but I did expect people to dress a bit more formally before sitting in front of their sets, now that two-way television is here.
Good evening. Welcome to the Shamley Silhouette. I already got it wrong. The Shamley Silhouette. Yet another analysis of Alfred Hitchcock. I am your host, Zach Eastman. This is going to be an experiment today. We are going to try and create a podcast companion to an article series I will be producing for RealNerdsPodcast.com about Alfred Hitchcock. The original intent was to go through all 52 of his films. There would be 53, but there's one missing. It's called The Mountain Eagle. So if anybody out there knows where the fuck The Mountain Eagle is, please call me, or better yet, please call the British Film Institute, because they're the people who should be getting that news. We are going to try to, instead of going through all 52 of the films, to just kind of talk about Hitchcock in general. These can be individual reviews of the films. They can be particular discussions on one film, discussions about a theme in Hitchcock's work, discussions about Hitchcock's collaborators, and more importantly, just to kind of celebrate a filmmaker who has laid the groundwork for a lot of filmmaking tropes and techniques and storytelling that we know today. For our trial run, I figured it was best to start with something familiar. If you are a Real Nerds podcast listener, you are aware of the recent discussions about a certain suave, debonair motherfucker named Cary Grant. By a certain individual, a certain one. I'm not going to say who he is yet. The person in question, Mr. Hitchcock used, which was Cary Grant, made 4 films together. He made 4 films with Mr. Grant. And they always end up being in the top 10 listings. Each one of these films, like whether together or separate, always find their way in the top 10 listings. So we're going to start with arguably the cream of the crop here. To help me do that, though, he is the host of Real Nerds Podcast and the president of the I Wish I Was Cary Grant fan club. Please welcome Mr. Ryan Frost.
Thanks for having me, Zach. I will try not to host this podcast. And I always struggle when I'm guests on something because I have to really take a step back because usually I'm the one steering the ship.
Well, I'll tell you right now, this is the pilot who tried to gun down Thornhill. Aha. But also, if I'm stumbling over the introduction of this already, we're in a bad spot. So maybe we should just give this over to you, generally.
Okay. No, thanks for having me. I'm excited because the other guys don't care about Cary Grant like I do.
Well, no.
And classic film.
And I think that, I think we all have our own little interests on the show in regards to what we like in movies, and I think we all generally appreciate classic films to one degree or another, except for Brad. I don't know if he appreciates them.
I don't know. I don't know if has he ever said, I really like an old movie.
You know what? I don't think so. And my only example is that he thought Halloween was boring. So
yes.
I sent out an interview / intro questionnaire kind of thing for
that
this
I did not do. So
yeah, but we already knew what you were going to do.
That's
here.
true.
Like I already had that from the get-go. He's going to talk about Cary Grant. Although originally I did think we would want to talk Psycho, but that actually is a different discussion, I think. Whereas with your obsession with Cary Grant combined with the Hitchcock subject at hand, I think that there's something to discuss here in terms of how does a star and a director work together. But the questionnaire that I gave everybody, Brad answered it by saying, I've only seen a couple episodes of Hitchcock Presents, and that was when I was a kid. And I was like, well, great, then that'll be your episode, so watch some fucking episodes.
Nice.
But we've got other people coming up
cool.
On the show that will talk about different subjects. I know that I just texted James, who is still raising his kid right now, like in the thrust of new fatherhood. But he and I are going to talk Rebecca,
Nice.
which I think is going to be the one that's going to be an interesting discussion in terms of how much a producer can interfere with a director's vision, but also it's fucking Rebecca. Like, who doesn't love Rebecca? But we're here today to talk about Cary Grant. What makes this combination so delightful? It's got to be something in.
I think a
both
lot
of
of it. Besides, if you take away To Catch a Thief, which I think is maybe their weakest collaboration. Not saying it's not a good movie, but all his other ones, Cary Grant kind of plays against type in them. Whether it's Suspicion, which is a great film, Notorious, which is amazing, and then I mean, when you talk North by Northwest, you're talking about one of the greatest films of all time.
Yeah.
So, in that, I guess in North by Northwest, it's a little more Cary Grant-ish. If you haven't seen North by Northwest, stop listening to me talk about it and go see the film. But he's kind of a fish out of water, and he's not really his normal dashing self in it.
No, he's very much a man on the run.
Yeah.
Which falls in line with the trope of the man who wasn't there and the 39 Steps.
Yeah.
Actually, it's been suggested, and I do agree with it, the 39 Steps is pretty much the original version of North by Northwest, or at least what it's like the origin point of it. But 39 Steps is based on a novel. North by Northwest is an original creation by Ernie Lehman. This combination that they had together, I do feel personifies one of two sides of Hitchcock when it comes to leading men. Obviously, there's the discussion of the women in his films, which is going to obviously be another episode entirely because it has to be discussed. But when it comes to his leading men, there are two ones he worked with the most. One was James Stewart, who was kind of the epitome of Hitchcock as he was. Like, there's a bit of nervousness behind it. There's an everyman quality to it, but there is also there's faults in it. Like, he's a vulnerable human being, susceptible to danger. Cary Grant, though, he is, by nature of his persona, the dream man, the guy you want to be. Like, he's the ladies love him, the dudes want to be him. The original Joe Cool, if you will.
Yeah.
And so within that, these films, with the exception of one, I feel, give Hitchcock the opportunity to vicariously live through Grant. And it's fascinating to me how a lot of different analysis of Alfred Hitchcock, which, if you want to, read Donald Spotto's book, or listen to The Secret History of Hollywood, you can kind of get a glimpse of Hitchcock and his personal persona. But it's interesting how the Grant persona in the Hitchcock films seems to be never really ignoring the negative sides, but it kind of smooths them over. I think in particular it's also important to know who Grant was as a performer and also as a person, because as we'll discuss later today, the Hitchcock films that he did eventually got to a point where personal life and movie life kind of collide, not in an overt way, but just subtle things. So, Ryan, you've been immersed in the Grant topic for, I want to say, about a year now, at the very least.
Yeah.
But first, I want to ask, did you get into Cary Grant on accident, or was it an all lifelong thing?
That's a good question. He's one of those actors that you're always familiar with, because if you like movies, I guarantee you like Cary Grant. And when I was growing up, my mom was a single mom, and so a lot of times I spent time at my grandfather's house, and he would always have TCM on when it was nothing but, or AMC when it was nothing but old-timey movies.
Oh, yeah.
And my grandfather really liked Westerns. But every once in a while, something with Cary Grant would sneak in.
Really?
The first Cary Grant film I can remember watching and not knowing it was Cary Grant was Bringing Up Baby. And at the time, when you're young, you're just like, oh, this is kind of a silly movie.
Yeah, it's about them trying to raise a leopard.
Yeah. And Katharine Hepburn. And, it's... So... I don't know, when did The Awful Truth came out last year on Criterion, I think in January.
Something around that time, yeah.
And I watched it, and I quickly realized, I said, man, I actually have a lot of Cary Grant films that I've seen, but I've never got into the Cary Grant filmography.
Right. Well, it's not something you think about right away.
Yeah.
I mean, like, there are solidified classics of his, much like Hitchcock's, which we'll get to in a minute. So Awful Truth, though, comes out on Criterion. And we know you probably already had Notorious. And,
Oh, yeah, I did. I had Notorious, North by Northwest, and To Catch a Thief.
Okay.
Already on Blu-ray.
So you were already prepared to go into the essentials.
Yeah. So, I mean, yeah, you have, there's pillars of Cary Grant. And, I still think The Awful Truth is his best film. But, if you're splitting hairs, you can put North by Northwest as 1A, 1B. So, you get into it, and then I slowly started developing this, like, he's really fun to watch. And
addictive, if you will.
Yeah, because when you watch him on The Awful Truth, he's a guy who's really handsome, is a really good actor, but he's not afraid to be made an ass. And that's the kind of commitment you need in films like a Hitchcock film, where if you're the guy out of water, like in North by Northwest, you got to believe that Cary Grant is a fish out of water.
Yeah, exactly.
And he's able to do that. And To Catch a Thief, you got to believe that he's some retired
retired jewel thief who was also in the war.
Yeah, and you do, and I think maybe his most underrated performance in the Hitchcock series is Suspicion, because he's so good in it. And he plays against type, and when we get to Suspicion, we can talk about why.
Yeah.
And it started a long time ago. I've always liked, since we've been friends, I've liked old timey movies.
Yeah.
And watching one of the best ever to do them is really rewarding.
And he's an actor who is consistently still to this day considered one of the greatest movie stars.
Oh yeah.
And we're not even talking about like actors just like only acting and whatnot, but you have to have kind of a combination of things. Like, I love Humphrey Bogart. I think Humphrey Bogart might be my favorite Golden Age actor. However, his when we think movie star, we don't necessarily jump to him right away all the time. We do tend to push toward Cary Grant, or Clark Gable, but I think Grant more so.
I think Grant is if you were to pick a person who would signify or typify a movie star, it'd be Cary Grant.
Yes.
Where you're tall, dark, and handsome.
Yeah.
He's 6'2", 6'1". He always has a tan.
Yep.
He always has a slick back hair, no matter what role he's in.
He's always got a kind of a smirk on his face.
Yeah, and he can be tough, too. If you see stuff like Destination Tokyo, or, in Father Goose, he's not a very nice guy in Father Goose either. He becomes, because he's Cary Grant, eventually he wins you over, but
right.
That's why you picked Father Goose, too. Towards the, North by Northwest he didn't make very many movies after that, because he became disenfranchised with Hollywood.
Yeah.
And that started really early in his career, where, you watch Golden Age films all the time. 39 of all his films were made in 7 years or something.
Yeah.
So he's making you and I go to a 9-to-5 job.
Yeah.
That's how actors were treated back then.
Yeah, like cattle.
Yeah. So you wouldn't, nowadays where you take someone like Tom Cruise, and he's not even in a movie this year.
Yeah.
But so Tom Cruise would go from Top Gun, then he'd go right into, Born on the 4th of July or whatever film. So he'd have the weekend off, and then Monday he's shooting another film.
Exactly. And it was a factory mentality back in the day.
Yeah.
It was very much like roll it off the assembly line, and hence the cattle coin term, which is a Hitchcock thing. Is he never said actors are cattle. He said actors should be treated like cattle, in a sense of just keep them moving, keep them going. They should know what they're doing. Basically, it was a dig against method acting. But to me, the Grant of it all is that, yes, at that point he does the bulk of his work in the 40s, and then the 50s it starts becoming dabs here and there.
Because he really starts picking things he wants to work on, and just by reading a couple biographies and just reading about him, he was just really done with Hollywood, because he didn't like how actors were treated, and I agree with him. He made a lot of money, but you don't get to pick your films, and he got felt like he's being treated like a second-rate Gary Cooper.
Which is why he went independent at that point.
And he went independent. I think The Awful Truth was his first independent film. If I might be wrong on that. But he started just picking his own projects.
Mm-hmm. Now, we'll put Grant aside for a second. Let's talk a little Hitchcock. He's the master of suspense. He's, frankly, the first director you kind of hear the name of, other than Spielberg, arguably, or George Lucas. But I think George
Lucas doesn't put out enough.
He stopped being a director a long time ago.
Yeah.
What is the first Hitchcock thing you ever see? Would you have to say?
I think The Birds was the first Hitchcock film I saw.
Same for me. Yeah. It's a film that attracts your eye when you like hear about like killer birds.
Yeah, and being younger, you don't appreciate film like I do now.
Yeah, did you not like it the first time you saw it?
No, I did. It's still, to me, it's. I still think it's a good movie, but when I put Hitchcock films in there, I don't know if it makes a top 10.
Yeah.
Because I still like some of his early stuff too. You mentioned 39 Steps. I like The Man Who Wasn't There a lot, or Man Who Knew Too Much. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And but what's fun about Hitchcock is you watch his films, you can see him starting to get a style.
Yeah.
And I don't know when his style actually takes over, but right away it's a Hitchcock film. Maybe Rebecca, when it has that really long shot in it, that is an amazing shot. Because I remember watching biography on him on A&E, and they talk about how meticulous he was. Mm-hmm. And that one shot in Rebecca when they're coming down the staircase.
Yeah.
Something, I don't know how long a continuous shot it was, but they had people running behind and adjusting the lighting, and
you basically have to move with which is very similar to the camera work that he uses in Young and Innocent, and also Notorious, which we'll talk about later. That shot from the balcony down all the way to Ingrid Bergman, which is a shot that they would talk about. Like, these shots would take up most of the day, but they were the ones that were all in his head. He pre-planned everything. He storyboarded everything to death. Basically, the movie was already made by the time he got in front of the camera to shoot it.
Did I hear right that he was maybe one of the first storyboard people that
He's the one who popularizes it, I believe. At the very least. Like, I mean, you could argue Walt Disney does that. I mean, obviously it's animation, but like Disney storyboarded things to death.
I guess I'm forgetting maybe the most famous one. So.
Yeah. but I mean, again, it's animation, so it's kind of different, Hitchcock's meticulousness, I think, comes from just like he already knows what the movie is in his head the moment by the time he gets on the set, all it is just giving actors adjustments if need be. But he's also said that the actors should know what they're doing as they go in. And this is a time before method acting really becomes a standard. I think he didn't work with many actors who were method primarily for that reason. And I mean, and obviously you're a horror fan, so we've all watched Psycho at some point, and that's obviously a big one. But
it's always hard for me because I love Cary Grant so much, but I probably think Psycho's my favorite film of his.
Really,
just because I think it's so unique, and Anthony Perkins is amazing in it.
Oh, he's brilliant.
And I mean, they have the shot when Norman stabs the cop coming up the stairs.
Oh yeah. Arbogast. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's amazing. And the film, I think, is one of the most shocking endings in movie history.
Yeah.
I mean, now it's it's such in people's subconscious. I'm pretty sure everyone knows the ending to Psycho.
Yeah. Which is why it was kind of weird that they were going to do Bates Motel, because I'm just like, well, I know how this story.
Great show.
It is a good show, but when it first came out, I was just like, well, I know how this fucking story ends.
Yeah.
But so you are more than familiar with Hitchcock's oeuvre, most of which we would argue would be the Grant films, because those are the ones you are going back to as of late. Mm-hmm. So tell me a little bit about Grant for the audience. Now, he comes from a very troubled background.
Very.
His mother is put away in an asylum.
Told she was dead.
Yeah, told she was dead. So Grant runs off and joins the acrobatic circus.
Yeah, he. If you've seen, I mean, I already mentioned The Awful Truth.
Yeah,
you can see the vaudeville in him. He's very. He's very good at it, and his childhood was awful. His dad really didn't care for him. His mom had some sort of mental health issues, and when he came home from school one day, she just wasn't there. Mm-hmm. And his dad said that she died. And so when he turned 15 or 16, he jumped on a boat and went to New York City, where he was known for working with stilts, and he was a very good stilt man. And he was on a couple Broadway plays there. It was really interesting when you read a book that how many of stars like that passed each other, cross paths. Mm-hmm. And he eventually decided he wanted to be in movies, and he just packed up and went to Hollywood. And there's newsreels. His first deal was with Paramount, if I remember correctly, and it's the great new star, Paramount, Cary Grant, and they bring him out, and he has, and they're really concerned about image there. So someone like Grant, who's handsome and attractive, he's going to be picked up right away. Which,
by the way, we should mention, Grant's not his real name.
It's not. It's Archibald Leach.
Yes, and obviously somebody at Hollywood said, like, no one's going to go see you if you're named Archie Leach.
Still a cool name, but it's something, I think I read an interview with Grant, and he wanted it to be really easy to say. That's why it's 2 syllables, Cary Grant.
Ooh.
So it sticks with you.
Rhythm, motion. Can you dig it?
And,
shoot the scene.
And what, just reading about him and going back and reading old things and biographies is, his dialect is really unique. He can play American, he can play British, and
because it's not quite British, but it's not quite American.
Yeah, it's not.
It's this weird middle ground that we live in.
And his cadence is so unusual and so unique.
The last time I've heard something as unusual as it is probably Doctor Strange.
Yeah. When
Benedict Cumberbatch tries to do his accent. It's not a bad one. It's just like, I know something's being hidden here.
Yeah.
So, and then Grant, gets picked up by Paramount. He does not like Paramount whatsoever. And then the Awful Truth comes around. He also tries to get out of the Awful Truth, we should mention.
Yeah,
because
big time.
Leo McCarey and him were not getting along at the time.
So I think, you mentioned how meticulous Hitchcock is. I think why they work so well together is because Grant was the same way.
Yeah.
He did not like improvising. McCarey loved the improvisation side of it. So they never really had a script. They had a script, but he says, okay, you're going to come in and be mad.
Yeah.
Let's see what happens with Irene Dunne. And I actually love Irene Dunne. I think she's amazing.
Yeah, she wins an Oscar for, or is nominated at least for The Awful Truth.
Yep. And so he's mad, and he offers $5,000 not to do this movie. And then there's this urban legend that McCarey offered $10,000 not to have Grant in the movie, which is probably both true. But I will say that maybe because he is uncomfortable in it, it brings out the best in him.
Yeah.
Because he has to be on his toes. The line that he improvises, I think, is the most brilliant in the whole film, and it's really stupid, but it's really amazing. The film is about him and Irene Dunne are getting a divorce, and they only have a dog. And so there's just this line where Grant knocks on the door, and she answers, and he says, "It's my turn to see the dog." And it's something along the lines of that, and it's really lame, but he delivers it in such a way that you believe him. And she's trying to hide him from her fiance. It's an awesome scene.
It's a screwball. It's
the definition of a screwball comedy and a screwball moment. And just the way he says, "I'm here to see the dog," is really funny. And so, I think that's why he works with Hitchcock so well, is because he is really meticulous.
Yeah.
And I mean, if you look how he's put together, everything about him. In his early films, he kind of had slicked back hair. I don't know what film he changed it to. It's always parted to the left, but his hairstyle never changed.
It has to have happened to sometime after Suspicion, or something, or maybe even after Notorious.
Yeah, I don't remember. I'll have to go back and look at my.
Somebody pulled the movie posters up for me right now.
Through my 50 of his films I've watched. But yeah, so he did The Awful Truth, and his first film was.
Oh no, Suspicion. He has it parted to the left.
Yeah, he does. I was going to say, I'm pretty sure he does. I think he does in The Awful Truth. That might be the first film he does it in.
I would have to imagine so then, if it's
because he goes from being like a stiff, my hand is in my pocket, I'm a super suave guy from Kiss and Make Up and The 30-Day Princess to,
he's a little more relaxed.
And he's having fun,
right? And I mean, we before we jump right into Suspicion, we have to mention that Grant at some point does try to retire.
Yeah,
he does eventually retire. Has a kid.
And he retires.
tumultuous marriages.
Yeah.
But, has a kid eventually, completely leaves the spotlight. He dies in 1986 on, not too long before he was supposed to go on for a performance of his one-man show, A Conversation with Cary Grant.
Wouldn't that be awesome to see?
Yeah, dude, there's...
I hope there's some recordings of it somewhere.
I've heard someone's bootleg recording, like where they bring their own stuff in there, which I've heard some of these kind of before with other performers. Like Dennis Day did a one-man show where he went through the whole Jack Benny stuff, but somebody brought in their recorder and recorded the whole show. I haven't found one with Conversation with Cary Grant yet.
Yeah, he worked for Fabergé as like an ambassador or something.
He was like,
or CEO or something.
Yeah, he was like on the board or something.
Yeah, and so he kind of, because he always wanted a kid, and as soon as his daughter was born, he literally retired. I think he made Walk Don't Run maybe a couple months after she was born, but then he was done.
Yeah,
and I don't know if it's his daughter or his wife Diane who said, people want to hear from you. People want to know what it's like to be Cary Grant. And he did an evening with Cary Grant, and I guess he loved it because he's back on stage. And it was Iowa. He wasn't feeling well, laid down, and died of a stroke.
Yeah.
And it's really a sad story. You're reading it, and his manager and people at the theater were saying, you should get help. He's like, no, I'm just going to go back to the hotel.
Yeah.
And I guess he was just ready to leave.
Yeah, exactly.
But a great actor.
A great actor. And more importantly, a great Hitchcock character.
A very great Hitchcock character.
And we're going to get into it right now. Let's start off 1941, Suspicion. Suspicion, obviously directed by Alfred Hitchcock. I'm going to stop saying directed by because we all know who the fuck directed these movies we're discussing. Screenplay by Samson Rafelson, Joan Harrison, and Elmer Revel. Joan Harrison, Hitchcock's original protege / secretary, who becomes a great producer in her own right and eventually ends up running a lot of the Alfred Hitchcock Presents, and Alma Revel, Mrs. Hitchcock, who wasn't credited on every script but essentially helped co-run the show. The most famous quote around Hitchcock's life is, the Hitchcock touch had 4 hands and 2 of them were Alma's. That was Charles Champlin, a article writer for, I think, the Los Angeles Times. And Suspicion is based on a novel called Before the Fact from 1932, written by Francis Ellis. The movie stars Cary Grant, Joan Fontaine, Sir Cedric Hardwicke, Nigel Bruce, and Dame Mae Whitty. Suspicion is done at RKO. They originally had tried to do it prior to Hitchcock even becoming involved. There's another script read by Westonson Inger that is available now in the in their private library. But then Hitchcock comes on board, and he tries to stick pretty close to the novel. The story basically talks about a woman who is of wealth, who marries a scoundrel, and when she does not give in to his demands to have her inheritance money be their income, he kind of starts acting suspicious, and she believes that she's killing people in order to eventually get to her to get her money. The original novel ends very darkly. It essentially ends with her knowingly drinking poison that her husband gives her, but before then writing a letter to her mother explaining that she loves Johnny too much to turn him in, which is a very dark concept for the time period we're discussing, which is the 30s and the 40s. And in a book, you can get away with it. And this isn't the first time Hitchcock's had to change something in a novel to adjust for the censors or studio expectations. Rebecca obviously changes a lot in order to make Laurence Olivier's character much more likable. And then the same goes with Cary Grant. The new ending of the film, the one that we all know today, is that turns out, unfortunately, he's kind of tangentially involved in coincidences. And him and Joan Fontaine walk off into the sunset. However, the majority of Cary Grant in that film is the darkest you'll ever see Cary Grant get, easily. Well, maybe you know of one that I don't.
Suspicion is a great film, and the reason it's so good is because you're right, Cary Grant is really dark in it, and it plays against what he's normally known for, and it's really suspenseful. And even though nothing really happens, I don't know if that makes any sense. It's the setup for something to happen.
Yeah, it's all anticipation, like literally the definition of suspense.
Yeah, because there's a scene where he comes back and he has all these gifts for all his friends and for her, and she's like, "How did you get this? You stole it from somebody." He's like, "No, I won it gambling."
Yeah,
and she doesn't believe him, but then it turns out he really won it on a racehorse. And the shot of Grant holding the milk is really unique, and it's really iconic.
Did you know that in order to make that shot work, Hitchcock put a little light inside the glass of milk?
Yes.
And it was to illuminate the glass of milk in the darkness of that scene as he's coming up the staircase.
And so that's not even the climax of the film, because they must know, people must have known the novel, because that is maybe 3/4 of the way through. So he's coming up, and it's really, she knows he's going to be poisoned because she writes a letter, and it's like, it's going to be poisoned, and she drinks it anyways, and nothing happens. And then they're on the drive, and she's freaking out, and the door swings open. He just saves her.
I rewatched the movie. She doesn't drink it. She just lets it sit there.
Oh, that's right.
Then the following shot is just it's still there.
That's
right.
Which
I'm like, that milk's gone fucking sour. Like, throw that shit out.
But yeah, it's really awesome. The only movie that I can say that maybe Grant's a touch darker in is because he kills people in it is Mr. Lucky.
That's right. You were talking about this a few weeks back.
He literally curb stomps a guy in it. So,
but is he a bad guy in it?
Well, he's not a good dude. The reason he takes the name in Mr. Lucky is because he doesn't want to go to the war, and he's going to get drafted. So they had
a
card.
Draft dodger.
Yeah, so they had a card where a guy had like some ailment that wouldn't allow him to go to war.
Okay, so Grant has always neared the edge of villainy, but never quite touched it, never tasted it.
Yeah, and this is a one too where the producer's like, "You can't have Cary Grant kill somebody."
Right, and Hitchcock's response intelligently is, "Why the fuck not?"
Yeah,
and I don't know if that's what he actually said.
And Grant was on board with being the bad guy.
Yeah,
but back then the studios controlled everything. So at the end of the day, if they didn't want him to be the bad guy, he's not going to be the bad guy.
Right.
Because I thought it would have been really fascinating, and it always makes me wonder if there is a deleted scene somewhere where Grant throws her off the cliff or something. You know what I mean?
Sorry, darling.
Because next time she'll learn to close the door. But that scene shot really well too is driving, because what Hitchcock does so well is whether it's his damsels in distress, usually they find a way to get themselves out of it.
They're much more resourceful than most heroines in films of that era.
Exactly.
Especially.
So, that one, you're in Joan Fontaine's shoes throughout the whole film, because Cary Grant is kind of an ass.
Yeah.
He's handsome, you like him, but then you're like, why are you talking about driving to the cliff and with your friend? And
which the psychological implication for Grant throughout that entire film is that he's never really been raised by a parent.
Yeah.
Which, as we discussed, a lot of the Hitchcock films he does are like tangentially tied to him, whether intentionally or unintentionally, to him as a person. So it's why he's able to kind of move into that realm pretty easily. But he's not specifically like dastardly, but it's
implied.
It's implied, and it's also like when he does turn dark, if you don't know the end of the film, then you're walking into it going like, oh, he's just like this creepy asshole. But knowing the end of the film, the intention of the psychological aspect is that she's not focused, she's only focused on herself and not focused on him, which I do think shortchanges her as a character sometimes. But at the end of the day, though, you are watching Grant become sinister at the drop of a dime. Like, he could be happy one minute, and then the next he's dark and brooding.
Yeah.
Which is very apparent in the scene when him and Beaky are going over the real estate plans.
Yeah.
But Beaky, played by Nigel Bruce, who, if you don't know who Nigel Bruce is, he was the original Dr. Watson in the Basil Rathbone, Nigel Bruce, Sherlock Holmes films. He's in 2 Hitchcock films, and this is, I think, the one where he's has the most to do. And I think I'm amazed that he wasn't in more Hitchcock films until you learn that he was apparently part of a round table of British actors who emigrated that kind of decided Hitchcock wasn't cool enough to be in their club. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that Hitchcock, amongst others, didn't go back to Europe to help fight the war, but there's a lot of like complicated elements within that.
Yeah.
When we have Grant in this film, though, it starts off right away, train already in a tunnel, light comes up and you see Cary Grant, and he's already a scoundrel from the get-go.
Yeah.
But there's something about him you want to like. And then as the movie kind of moves and weaves forward, you get the picture of a man who seems like he's trying to do the right thing, but does not have the tools in his head to do so. By the time you get to the end, it's kind of unclear if he's even learned his lesson. But what is known is that the one mistake he didn't make was marrying her. And which he keeps saying throughout the entire film. And that's like one of those things, because of the ending we have, I do believe it. Yeah,
it's a film that is actually the last Hitchcock Grant film I saw. And I think when you rewatch it, I've watched it about 3 or 4 times, but when you watch it with knowing the ending, you see little things in the performance, you see little things in the script, you see little things that you might have missed the first time.
Yeah, that's how I watched it last night.
Yeah, because you see that he is actually trying to do the right thing, but you already touched on it. He doesn't know how to do the right thing because he's a thief.
Yeah.
And he's a scoundrel.
Yeah.
But he knows he loves Joan Fontaine, and so...
Exactly. One of the best lines that Joan Fontaine has in the movie is like, "You're just a baby." And I'm just like, he's a big old man, baby.
He needs to learn to grow up. And
exactly.
He doesn't always make the right choices.
Right. And it's also... it's a Hitchcock film that you start digging into a lot of his signature tropes and stuff. One of which, obviously, we discussed, which is the milk. But you also have a lot of just the use of...
MacGuffin!
The MacGuffin, yes. The use of rear projection, which there's a lot of driving in this movie. There's a lot of driving. There's a lot of driving in a lot of the films he did with Hitchcock.
There is.
And we'll talk about one of the most famous of the driving sequences. But Suspicion opens up, ends up getting nominated for Best Picture.
Sure.
And Joan Fontaine wins Best Actress, which arguably... she's actually winning for Rebecca, but didn't win for Rebecca.
Yep.
And we'll get into the Rebecca thing in another episode. But Grant's not nominated. And this is a frequent problem with the Academy because of the fact that he went independent.
Yep.
The only 2 nominations he gets are for Penny Serenade and...
None But the Lonely Hearts.
None But the Lonely Hearts, yeah. And so the discussion has come up within the discussion of Grant is, if you were to give him an Oscar for anything, what would it be? And my argument is to give it to him for Notorious for Best Supporting Actor. Because I think when we get into that next, there's a lot of stuff at play here. However, I'd also give it to North by Northwest because he basically does the equivalent of what Leo does in The Revenant, which is just go for broke and do every fucking thing in the world.
That's an interesting question. I didn't really think about it too much. It's a travesty because he's so good in so many films.
Or The Awful Truth. Even.
The Awful Truth, I can see it. I mean, he's so good in that. I mean, I just watched A Room for One More. He's so great in that. Mr. Lucky. I mean, he's so good in films, but he kind of got blackballed from the Academy for being independent.
Right.
Which now is, that's not even a thing anymore, so.
Yeah, and today the Academy has way more problems than just that one Grant issue.
Yeah.
Don't see Green Book, guys. Anyway, so now we're going to move on to Notorious, 1946.
I love this film.
It is a wonderful film. Written by Ben Hecht, frequent collaborator of Mr. Hitchcock's. Roy Webb does the music, and I love the opening theme to Notorious.
Yeah.
I like how it kind of kicks in with Dire Danger and then kind of moves into a soft melody.
Yeah.
And you have you have kind of like the birth of modern espionage films in this film. Not he was always involved with espionage films, but this one's kind of like has the most like the beginnings of the modern elements that we start to see in films today. Yeah. But Notorious tells the story of a woman whose father is tried, convicted of treason, in the U.S., giving the Nazi secrets. She is recruited by a man named Devlin, played by Cary Grant, to infiltrate another Nazi organizer played by Claude Rains. And, of course, the woman in question we're talking about is the lovely Ingrid Bergman. This film has a lot of psychological and sexual tension pouring throughout the film.
Yeah,
it's seeping with it.
When I think of a Hitchcock movie, Notorious is one of I think is the epitome of a Hitchcock film. Mm-hmm. I mean, you have the MacGuffin with the key. You have so many other things, or the wine, or whatever you want to call it. And in it, Cary Grant, too, he plays kind of against type 2, where he's still a nice guy, but he's not that nice to Ingrid Bergman because he wants something from her.
Right.
And, so the whole premise is him forcing her to be with Claude Rains.
Right.
Because, hey, this dude's a Nazi, and because of who your dad is, you owe us.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's pretty great.
And we have to remember, for those who haven't seen Notorious, the first 20 minutes of the film, they already fall in love. Yep. It's like one of the most expressly quick love stories. Like, the last time I saw something that quick in terms of romance was Crazy Rich Asians. Like, they're already together. So the most famous scene of this film, arguably, is that kissing scene. That long take of Ingrid Bergman and Cary Grant kissing, which, a lot of things kind of jump to your head as what's more romantic and whatnot. Because, like, Ingrid Bergman seems to be involved with some of the most romantic scenes in Hollywood history, whether it's Casablanca or Notorious. That pushes the tension further with allowing us to kind of, like, explore, like, well, does Devlin really love her? Is it really just, like, is it a fling for him, or is it something more? Alicia's character, to me, is a person who falls in line with a lot of other women who go up against Grant, where she desperately wants him. It's the same with Joan Fontaine in Suspicion, where she wants him. But Ingrid Bergman's also willing to play a game to toy with his heart. And I think with Notorious, you get a very interesting cross-cut between Devlin and Alicia. Alicia's more our focus, but Grant does get a lot of attention in this film. The thing that fascinates me about the film, though, hands down, in regards to Grant, is how he kind of plays around with not wanting to be around women.
Yeah.
Now, this isn't new to Grant at this point. He has done this before, where he's kind of not interested in pursuing anything. Like, I guess you'd call it bachelorhood. But within this one, I think you get to see, you mentioned it before, the darker complex, but also just kind of like somber and kind of like really heartbroken to a degree. When he finds out, or when she tells him that she's going to marry him, it kind of basically crumples his brain a little bit further to the point of almost no return. But he ends up being the best hero ever. Yeah. Because he just goes up there, grabs her, and does that wonderful thing with the gun with Claude Rains. Just holding it to Claude Rains. Which, by the way, Claude Rains, one of the best weasels Hollywood ever had. And I think with this film, you get a lot of Grant kind of getting to run the gamut. And this is where we start seeing a little bit more of the Hitchcock dream guy mold, where he's not going to let anything happen to Alicia, but he's also a man who's going to, be his own man.
Yep.
I think that with the persona, though, there is a little bit of, like, much like Suspicion, it pushes our love of Grant. Like, how much can we really like this guy?
And I think that's why Hitchcock casts him in these films, is because we already know and love Cary Grant. So we're taking that knowledge into the movie or the theater. You're taking that with you as you go.
It's baggage, yeah.
It's baggage. And so when you play against type, it works really well. Because, I mean, he's still the suave, cool dude. But there's a hint of darkness to him in both films that I think play against who you expect him to be. I mean, there's scenes at I can point to the racetrack scene in this where he's not very nice to Ingrid Bergman's character.
No, he makes her cry. Flat out makes her cry.
Yeah, and so you when you see that from Grant, you're not used to it.
Yeah.
You're not used to him being that harsh.
Yeah.
So I think that's why he becomes I mean, Jimmy Stewart's great in Rear Window, and I love Gregory Peck in Spellbound, but I think Grant's going to be Hitchcock's best leading guy because he plays against that type.
He's able to tap into the darkness that Hitchcock desires while still maintaining himself, which I think is a hard trick to balance sometimes.
It is. But I think Grant was a professional enough that he could do that, and it makes sense. And he's again, the meticulous thing. His performances are so nuanced that you go, oh, it's Cary Grant. He's so happy, but he's going to make the beautiful and just vulnerable woman at the racetrack cry because she's already, he's playing on her emotions too because she's in love with him. Her dad just got convicted to be a Nazi, and now you're being forced to spy on another person who they believe is a Nazi
by marrying him
and
being around him and his overbearing mother.
Exactly, and so Grant's mean to her.
Oh yeah,
and so it's very because he loves her too. So it's very fascinating. It's one of my favorite Grant movies.
And a weird film about alcoholism, or at least do you believe someone when they say they're sober? Like her whole thing at the beginning of the film is just she's just getting flat out drunk at a party, wakes up hungover to Cary Grant. Actually, I love the scene in the car with them driving down the highway and getting pulled over by the cop because she insists on driving. But throughout the film, like, he doesn't believe her half the time because she's starting to get woozy, little realizing that she's being poisoned. So it kind of plays off the the movie's about trust. It is ultimately about who do you trust, how much do you trust somebody, and how far does that trust go. And it ends with one of the greatest like shots out of a door towards a door of all time. Like Grant leaves with Ingrid Bergman. Claude Rains has to go back inside.
Yep.
It's terrifying. There is a mother issue in this film, not with Grant though. It's with Claude Rains, who has arguably the mother from Nazi hell.
But it also gives Claude Rains' villain a little more
depth.
Not just I'm a Nazi.
Yeah, it's a dynamic range to work with. It makes him more devious. Like, I believe that on his own, like when he's meeting with the other Nazi guys and they're talking about that one guy that they've already got to, bump off because he's talking too much or freaking out too much about a wine bottle. He's still kind of like the even-keeled guy. The mother adds to that, and then when he finally figures out that Alicia is betraying him, that's when he snaps and becomes more devious. But even then, he loses that immediately because at the end of the day, he is still a coward by comparison to his mother. So it's a theme we see running throughout a lot of Hitchcock films, not the least of which is Psycho, where the overbearing mother kind of overpowers the timid son. Mm-hmm. So Notorious kind of deals with a lot more than I think we were used to at the time with Hitchcock. So it then ends up becoming one of the staples that we talk about today. The film was very well received. It was nominated for Best Supporting Actor for Claude Rains, not Grant.
That's all right.
But Ben Hecht was nominated for the screenplay, and deservedly so. It is a very interesting film, and one that apparently they had to push through the government censors because they didn't want them specifically talking about atom bomb or A bomb or anything nuclear weapons oriented because we had just come out of World War II and we were worried about Russia getting the bomb. So the less you talk about it, the better. But they find a good MacGuffin within the key, but also there's the pointlessness of like it doesn't really matter what kind of weapon they're trying to develop. All you have to know is they're building a weapon.
Yeah.
And that scene in the wine cellar where they're looking through it, and then he's got to get the mineral ore back in the bottle before it's too late is really fun. It's a fun little banter scene that then turns into terrifying nightmare.
Yeah.
So then a few years go by. We're not working together as a team, but there was a little film called Rope with Jimmy Stewart eventually in the film. Apparently Hitchcock wanted Grant for Rope.
Yeah, I forget what movie Grant was doing, why he was busy. I can't.
It's 48, so
Gunga Din. So he had to film Gunga Din, I think, for over a year.
Yeah.
Did I remember that?
Wait, Gunga Din would have been in the late 30s. But anyway, regardless, if anybody doesn't know what Rope is, we will be talking about it eventually because it is one of the most fascinating Hitchcock films. Rope is about two guys who commit a murder and then invite their professor along with a whole party to celebrate something trivial with them not realizing there's a dead body in the middle of the room. And it's all shot within a series of 2 takes. Mr. Blandings builds his dream home, and Every Girl Should Be Married would be the films that he would have been involved in.
Every Girl Should Be Married is a great movie.
Yeah, I like Mr. Blandings.
Yeah,
have you watched
fun.
Mr. Blandings?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, good.
It's fun.
But so anyway, Rope, though, the character that Grant would have played is the professor of the 2 boys who commit the murder. And it's a dark role. It's a very dark role. And my estimation is that if you were never going to get Grant to be a villain, this would have been the closest you had gotten where you don't necessarily have to change him too much in terms of the character. The character does end up being very moralistic and aware, but there is a darkness to him. I think the only reason Grant would have been off-putting for me in that role is only because he seems to not be, on the surface, the kind of guy who would believe the things James Stewart's character believes moralistically about murder. Like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think Jimmy Stewart, too, is a little more everyman relatable than Cary Grant is.
You almost believe he's a weathered professor who has had time to think about this, whereas Grant would be a little bit more. Although that might also add a different psychological bent to it.
I mean, it'd be interesting.
But finally, we come back in 1955. Now, at the time, Grant was going to retire, but then Hitchcock proposed a movie on the French Riviera with Grace Kelly, and you don't refuse that, and it's called To Catch a Thief. From 1955, the screenplay by John Michael Hayes, based on the novel To Catch a Thief. This is also the film where, this is among the era where the Hitchcock style is signified, but this is one of the least Hitchcockian films in that era. It's not the only least one. Trouble with Harry also has a little bit of differences by comparison to other Hitchcock films that we see throughout the 50s into the 60s. To Catch a Thief, though, is very much an Ocean's 11 movie before there's Ocean's 11 movies. It tells the story of Jean Robey, Jean Roby, a cat burglar who is retired after serving in the war and getting a pardon as a result. But a cat burglar has been stalking the French Riviera and stealing jewels in the same pattern as him.
There's like a Mel Brooks moment, too, where the police show up to his house and he's, trying to get out and stuff like that.
It's one of the greatest, what would you call gotcha moments? Or you see the cars chasing each other down the Riviera, and the cinematography by Robert Burks, which won an Oscar for this film, shows a montage of them going through the French Riviera. You see the 2 cars driving each other, and it's by that time you're not thinking that he couldn't be in the car.
Yeah.
That's not even a thought in your head. Cut to the moment when they pull him over, and it's actually his maid. Yeah. And you realize that Hitchcock and Grant have both played a trick on you where he was back at his house the entire time. Thus leading him to get on the bus where we see the Hitchcock cameo.
Yeah.
But now he has to go to the French Riviera and figure out who is committing these robberies. And on the way, he meets Grace Kelly, and it becomes very much a love story about Grace Kelly falling in love with a thief. The plot of the film is very unimportant.
Yeah.
It's very unimportant.
It's my least favorite of their collaborations, not because it's not a good film, but I don't know. It's shot nice. It's well acted.
It's a light affair.
It seems like it's an excuse to put Grace Kelly and Cary Grant in a movie.
Which I can't think of any better reason to do a movie.
No, that's fine too. It's when I think of Hitchcock, I think of things that are a little more substantial. Mm-hmm. But if you ask anybody, it's a very big crowd pleaser, and it's maybe Grant's second most well-known film, or third, maybe Charade, North by Northwest, and then To Catch a Thief.
It's the one that I've heard a lot of people, when I've been sending this out, that people mention, and I'm always surprised.
Yeah.
Because when you have Hitchcock especially, the gamut runs vastly. There are some films nobody ever talks about, and then there's some that people talk about, but they forget that it's Hitchcock. And To Catch a Thief, I think, is one that people have to look up and realize, oh, he did that. That's mine.
Yeah, and you can see Hitchcock's style throughout it. I mean, you know it's a Hitchcock film when you watch it.
Oh, absolutely.
I think just the story is different than anything he's done, and that's fine. I mean, as an artist, you should be able to make what you want to make, and it's a good movie.
If you can add your visual stylistic tone to it, then it totally works. It is a chase movie, and he has always said that like one of the greatest inventions in cinema was the chase.
Yeah.
Because that's a lot of his movies are very much a chase, in different ways or another. And the one of the most striking visual elements outside of the fireworks sequence, which that's one of the most Hitchcockian things about that movie is that fireworks scene. But the scenes on the roof with the cat burglar up to the climax, there is a distinct like kind of German expressionist flair to it. The colors kind of seem a little off, but they're also striking at the same time, and they kind of play with the silent film motif that he worked in when he was in the Gaumont period back in Britain. The thing that fascinates me about the film also is that how a lot of Hitchcock bad guys tend to have kind of like a Bond-esque type of disfigurement or quirk about them, in which case the two cops that are chasing after Grant in this film, one of them really likes to do pull-ups at the beach.
Yep.
You have a lot of great performances in this film. Like, it's funny, Cary Grant is not the only thing to love about this film, nor is Grace Kelly. You have Jesse Royce Landis, who plays Grace Kelly's mother, in what I think is the funniest Hitchcock mom of all time. Hands down, a woman who, one, is just about the same age as Grant, if not a little younger. But the way she plays Grace Kelly's mom is astounding. It's something we'll see from her again in the next film we'll discuss. But she had an ability to play off of Grant, so much so that it's a shame that casting choices the way they are, we wouldn't want to put them together, even though they're very close in age. Because, you want, at the time you wanted, and I guess it is still true today, older man with a slightly younger girl or something like that, just to kind of like, it looks more glamorous to a degree for some reason. I don't fucking know.
Yeah, it's one of those things too where Grant at a point said he's not going to be chasing women anymore, they need to be chasing me.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much the standard for his films.
And again, we were talking about this before, but Kelly goes after him. He doesn't want a relationship. He wants to clear his name so he can go back home. He does not. And it's the same with the Danielle character, who is the gal she taught stuff to during the war, for Cap in terms of thieving and stuff. She's like kind of pursuing him too, but as you find out later with the twist, which is kind of convenient, she's mainly just trying to throw him off a trail. The only thing about this film that to me is a little off is that there are certain like expositional things at the end that are a little unnecessary. Mm-hmm. I don't think once we see Danielle that we need Grant saying, "I knew it was you. Just your father taught you how to do that during the war." I'm like, I don't need that. It's fine. Just toss her off the building and have her admit to it. That's fine.
Yep. I'm gonna let go.
But and then also the Grace Kelly making this film in Monaco and the French Riviera, she later becomes the Princess of Monaco.
She does.
And I can't confirm this. Like, I was reading this a little bit, but she died in an automobile accident, having a stroke while driving on a road. It's assumed that the road was the road they were driving down in that movie, and that the final spot was the spot
Hitchcock did it to her.
I'll teach you to become a princess.
Say no to my movies.
No, you'll be in Monty or you'll be in hell. But the movie for Paramount, which, by the way, this is the only movie to this day that Paramount still owns of Hitchcock's, and Hitchcock had a long Paramount contract. You know why? Because the other films are now owned by Universal MCA because of that big
Didn't he have his own office on the Paramount lot?
He did, but he had moved to Universal around the late 50s at that point. It's mainly because of Alfred Hitchcock Presents, which is, I believe, where they were filming parts of, or at least had their Shamley offices. The podcast is called The Shamley Silhouette because Shamley was his production company for the television show, and that's where we get that famous silhouette. So now you know the origin of that bullshit. I actually like the score too by Lynn Murray.
Yeah,
it's a fun, light kind of
it's a fun movie.
Area affair. The film had kind of a mixed reception by critics and stuff, but now we regard it in a high esteem. Robert Burks, as I said, won the Academy Award for Best Cinematography, while the art direction and the costume design were nominated. And Edith Head, the costume designer, frequent Hitchcock collaborator, I don't think these are the most elegant of her gowns, but Grace Kelly's dress in that ball sequence.
Well, it helps that Grace
stunning.
Kelly is an amazingly beautiful woman.
So it's easy to make her even look more beautiful. And now finally we get to the creme de la creme of Hitchcock movies and Cary Grant movies, for that matter, arguably.
Is To Catch a Thief Grant's first color picture? It is.
Oh, wow.
I just thought of that. And because
did it scare people when they finally saw his tan?
No, they're like, man, that dude is sexy. Because I can't. It is. It's the first
I just imagine,
colored Grant film.
I just imagine every woman in America being like John Raphael, like, that guy is fire! But now we get, though, like I say, to the cream of the crop, which is North by Northwest. 1959, written by Ernest Lehman, cinematography by Robert Burks, edited by George Tomasini, and music by Bernard Herrmann, which we're finally at Bernard Herrmann in this period. And Bernard Herrmann, arguably one of the greatest composers in film score history, before obviously John Williams. Mm-hmm. But Bernard Herrmann prior to this, he does Citizen Kane and he does other kind of films throughout the 40s before he teams up with Hitchcock. And he starts with The Trouble with Harry with Hitchcock, but then he but then he gets to go forward, and I think the last thing they work on together is Marnie, because then they were going to do the next one after it together, but then they had a falling out. But North by Northwest is the ultimate Hitchcock film.
Yeah.
It tells the story of Richard Thornhill, a bumbling ad executive who gets mistaken for a spy.
Because he looks so good.
Yeah, and also he calls his name out at the wrong place at the wrong time at a restaurant.
Yeah.
So James Mason's out to kill him. Other people are out to kill him. Eva Marie Saint's out to at least beautiful. Capture him and kill him. She is gorgeous in the movie. Oh my God.
Yep.
Rewatch. She looks great in 4K. I will tell you that. She looks great in 4K. And it all leads to a big old climax at Mount Rushmore. Much like To Catch a Thief, I feel like the plot doesn't matter too much as the sequences themselves.
It doesn't, but I think why this one is a little more well regarded is because I think the script's more playful, and it mixes in the suspense pretty well. I mean, everyone knows the crop dusting scene, and it's, that starts off so innocent. I mean, he's dropped off in the middle of nowhere.
And that shot lasts for a long time. It's a high crane shot that Burks got where it's just sitting there. The bus comes in, leaves him, and then it kind of holds for about another 2 minutes before it goes back to him, and it just kind of plays on the silence. And one thing about Hitchcock that it kind of becomes apparent as you watch his films, but it shouldn't come as a surprise. He comes up from the silent film era. He does believe in pure cinema, which is the idea that you should not have to tell a film with just dialogue. You should be able to tell it straight through the images. That whole sequence is pretty much silent.
That's the epitome of it.
Yeah, so what he does, though, in a lot of his films, and especially this one, the only sound effects you hear are necessary ones. Everything else is literally turned down.
Yeah.
Like, to nothing.
I mean, you have a villain in the scene that's an airplane, and the sound of the biplane going, is very deliberate.
Yeah, and his building of suspense is so brilliant in that film that when a bus comes, you get worried.
Yep.
When a guy gets off a bus, you get worried. Like, just those tiny sounds kind of hit perfectly.
Yeah, and that's we talked about Joan Fontaine and Suspicion. This is Thornhill in North by Northwest. He's stuck.
Yeah.
So you're along with the ride with him, and you're just as clueless as he is, going, what all this is going on here? Who's this dude who just got off the bus, and why is a plane trying to kill me? It's very fascinating.
Why do I have to climb up the president's nose? See, all these things that come. Why is James Mason so bored? I'm sorry, I made that claim a couple weeks ago. James Mason is the most bored villain in cinematic history. You get the perfection of the Hitchcock mold by this point of who Hitchcock would want to be, as opposed to who Hitchcock is. And Cary Grant's performance is literally like, by this point, they've worked together so much that he knows the beats.
Yeah.
There's actually a story about, so the hotel where they filmed the scene where he's going to have dinner before he calls out his name and then gets taken away. That was the Plaza Hotel. He had a room at the Plaza. And I guess somebody went up to Hitchcock and said, like, aren't you going to tell him how to walk through the lobby? He's like, he's been walking down this lobby for so many years. Like, I'm not going to tell him how to walk through his own lobby. Which is, like, similar to just, like, I'm not going to tell Cary Grant what the fuck to do. Like, he knows exactly what the fuck he's doing.
Say the lines.
Say the fucking lines. And then you also get the kind of peak. Now, we didn't mention it To Catch a Thief, but John Robey's past is that of a man who was an acrobat who basically ran away from home. So you kind of bleed in some of Grant's personal life into To Catch a Thief. Arguably, the mother issues in this film, while not exactly Grant's, allow him to play off of something there. Yeah. A bit of an overbearing mother. And he basically, like in Suspicion, is a child. He has not really had a sustaining force in his life. Now, granted, these are based on concepts from the 40s and the 50s, but they do apply today. This is also a performance where Grant gets to literally do everything.
Yeah.
I mean, everything. I don't think there's anything funnier to my mind in terms of Grant than watching that scene in the jail when he's calling his mom drunk. Yeah. That is some great drunk acting. Like he's treating it super seriously. He has been through hell. But just the situation is too delightful.
I agree.
And you get a lot of the man in peril, but knows he's innocent. He's still able to be charming while in terrible danger, which to me is the epitome of the Hitchcock mold that you want out of your idealistic hero. It also kind of follows the plot line we've been discussing about Hitchcock being the pursuee and not the pursuer when it comes to women. Although in Eva Marie Saint's case, I believe it's kind of matched up because she is after him, but not for the reasons that would normally be part of the Grant persona.
Yeah, I guess eventually she falls for him.
Right, and he equally does try to pursue her to a certain extent. So it's almost like the first, or not the first, but like it's one of the few Grant films where he is actively pursuing someone to an extent. It's more so just to get information to get himself cleared, but you can always tell that there's a little. It's Eva Marie Saint. Of course, you're going to be a little in love with her.
Yeah.
And there's something that we haven't discussed though. He did have acrobatic training. He had training in vaudeville. Went through the gamut of performing live on your feet and having to do things that are very risky. It's a fact that he did a lot of his own stunts in his films. It's almost like he's the Tom Cruise of his era.
That's right.
Which kind of now makes me understand you more, Ryan.
There you
go. But the scene in the crop dusting scene, it's not all shot on location. But the stunts are Grant. The scene where he's ducking the plane is shot on a stage, but he's having to kind of plop down and down. And there was a scene that connects to it where he goes underneath a truck. Apparently they didn't get the right amount of chalk on him, so they had to go back and reshoot that thing because, like, by that point he was supposed to be all dirtied up. So he was an incredibly utilitarian actor. He was able to kind of run the gamut, not just on the persona.
Go see The Awful Truth.
Exactly.
You can see how physical and how great he is.
He's light on his feet, knows how to fucking dance is what he knows how to do. Yeah. And by the end of North by Northwest, we started off in Suspicion with coming out of a train tunnel. Where do we go at the end of North by Northwest? Into a train tunnel.
Such a metaphor.
Yeah, because they're about to fuck.
Yeah.
Actually, I love that's one of the best edits. It's not that, but it's when he's still pulling her up Mount Rushmore and just, come on over, Mrs. Thornhill.
Yeah.
I just think nobody's ever tried to do that anymore, to my knowledge. Nobody's tried to pull that trick on us again. And I think it may be only Hitchcock can do that.
Probably.
You'd have to have balls to try to pull that off, I'd feel.
Yeah.
Like, I don't even think like Brian De Palma is known for ripping off Hitchcock. Or not ripping him, but homaging him. I don't think even De Palma could get away with that. Because it's just something so specific to Hitchcock's Flight of Fancy.
Oh, yeah.
Which we haven't really talked about it, but the details in Hitchcock films, and especially the Grant films, the details are not as important as the story as a whole. I think it's arguably safe to say that when we go to watch a movie, sometimes we get bogged in some details to a degree. Partially because we kind of get invested, especially with superhero films, we get a little meticulous. I know I do, because when I see certain details, I'm like, well, that doesn't match up with this thing that they said earlier, blah, blah, blah. But the beauty of Hitchcock films, and even this, and especially North by Northwest in particular, is that the particulars aren't as important as the whole. The whole is greater than the sum of its parts. So it's very much the escapist fare.
Yeah.
So we kind of end the Grant run on a high note of pure fantasy and escapism, and it was very well received, like super well received. So much so that when Paramount was asking for their last film on the Hitchcock contract, they wanted something like this film, and instead they got Psycho. Which, I mean, if I were Paramount and I was hearing that idea, I would be like, fuck no. You're going to do what now?
Both become super iconic.
Yeah. The film was nominated for 3 Academy Awards for editing, art direction, and original screenplay by Ernie Lehman. The 2 of the 3 of the awards went to Ben-Hur instead, and the other went to Pillow Talk. Again, the Academy has no idea what the fuck it's doing.
Ben-Hur.
Yeah, but it is high on the AFI. It's been selected by the National Film Registry. It's a film that is immensely enjoyable to this very day.
Oh yeah, it's an amazing film.
Do you have a favorite scene in the film?
Man, that's a tough one. I don't know. I don't know.
There's too many.
I
great
do
ones.
like the scene when he's in the forest talking before they go to the house.
Right.
I love the banter there. I love when he's inside the house and he's sneaking around.
Oh, that is a great moment.
Yeah.
'Cause that's when Martin Landau finds out that the gun is fake.
Yeah. Man, that's tough. I usually like little subtle things more than the big bombastic stuff. He does a couple looks, and I don't know. I now have to think about it. I really enjoy the film. I don't know if I can pinpoint one that's my favorite moment in it, though.
I love the. I would have to say I love the scene in the dining car. A lot.
Yeah.
It's sexy without being too overtly sexy.
Yeah, it's
so
pretty
it's
awesome.
it's a nice affair. He's wearing sunglasses the entire time.
Yeah, he just looks cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just a film that I love and cherish so much that I have a hard time picking a favorite moment. It's like when people ask me what my favorite scene in Army of Darkness is.
He's like, you can't.
I don't know. I just, as a whole, I just love the film so much. North by Northwest or The Awful Truth or Charade. I don't know if I can pinpoint like a moment in the films that I love Cary Grant the most in.
Right.
Where something like Room for One More, I can point to him taking, the suitcase back up the stairs and keeping the little orphan girl with him.
Yeah. But you only know about that scene because you knows how to read.
Yes.
I'm sorry. I still need to see this movie because I love that fucking line.
But so that movie is so well done and it's so amazing. I don't know if I can pick a favorite moment from it, but the dining car is amazing. Anytime it's just him and Ava St. Marie, I really like it. I like when it's stripped away because the fantasy or the crop dusting or the Mount Rushmore or the scene inside the restaurant Mount Rushmore, they're propelling the story. But I like more of the intimate moments.
So you're ready for a little goof, though, at the scene inside the Mount Rushmore restaurant?
It's very infamous.
Yeah, so for anybody who hasn't seen it, there is a confrontation between Grant, Mason, and Eva Marie Saint, and I guess Landau, in the restaurant next to Mount Rushmore. And it's a wide shot, and I believe it's Grant's getting ready to shoot. Mm-hmm. And before, there's an extra in the background. It's a little kid who already anticipates the bang and plugs his ears approximately 5 to 10 seconds before Grant even fires the gun, and it's clear as day. You can see it.
You know, there's
easily.
there's a subtle one in there too that I sent you the GIF of it, or the GIF, or what do you want to call them, where Grant's reacting to the car steering, and the dude next to him doesn't, so he kind of falls into him to make him say, "Hey, you're supposed to be acting."
Perform, damn it, perform.
I cannot work with someone who doesn't react to the car moving.
It's not well, and actually, in To Catch a Thief, there's when they're going back into the car to drive off before she discovers that reveals that she knows who he is. You can see studio lights in the fucking rearview mirror. So, you know, like,
it happens.
These are some of these things are just overt mistakes, but some of them are also ones you finally catch when the film's been upscaled and restored and remastered. You're just like, oh, I don't think they counted for that much clarity. So that's basically the end, though. After this, we don't get any more Grant and Hitch together.
He doesn't do very many more movies. I think he does like 3 or 4 more.
Although there was one that could have been. But Mr. Grant, rightfully so for the sake of his health, decided that he wouldn't want to do a series as a suave sex addict detective or just super spy known as James Bond. That, and I believe Hitchcock was like also offered it like within the combination of that realm with Grant. I don't feel like either of them would have.
He would have been good as James Bond, but
they would have been good, but
you didn't need to do it.
You didn't need to do it, and I think that they're of a different mindscape to do it. You know, I think Connery kind of fits the mold better just because he's willing to kind of jump in, whereas Grant is a little more established.
Yeah, and I think Grant may have been a little too old at that point.
Exactly.
And,
I mean,
he was already disenfranchised with Hollywood, so being part of a franchise literally probably wasn't that appealing to him.
Yeah, even though James Bond was much more like it's Eon and it's more out in Britain per se, it's still that same idea of just like, I don't want to be under contract to somebody. I don't want to be running through a gambit.
I'm pretty sure that might have been the most part, is he'd have to sign a contract saying, I'm going to do 2, 3, 4 of these films, and he's no way he was going to do that.
He's just like, can't I just do Dr. No? Wait, can we do the Goldfinger one first? Like, that'd be fun. I want to see a girl naked in gold. But they don't work together again, although they do keep in touch.
When did Hitch die?
Hitch died in 1980.
Oh, so a few years before Grant.
Yeah, and Grant appeared at the AFI tribute for him amongst a slew of other people. He didn't make too big a speech, but he said, here's to many more, and he was sitting right next to Hitch at the event. Grant's
not really a big publicity guy.
No.
He is really private.
But he obviously came out for his buddy.
He would come out for his friends and stuff.
Yeah. So that wraps up essentially their team up together. And I guess ultimately what you get from the Grant Hitchcock mold is it's basically any director who makes a movie, to my mind, a lot of them project their ideals and their like what could they have if they could have anything in the world. And I think with the Hitchcock Grant collaboration, it really is Hitchcock would have loved to have been Cary Grant, and he got to put him in 4 adventures where he could explore the different cosmos of that dream. And also he knows a talent when he sees it, and he knows how to play up the unextraordinary man in an extraordinary situation. And that's what Grant is able to do, is able to play an everyman who gets put into the most ridiculous positions. I mean, bringing up baby is a ridiculous concept.
It is.
But it is done well because you have someone like Grant in there. And because you have someone like Hepburn coming in. I mean, like, not even Howard Hawks is like necessarily, to me, the biggest equation of that movie. It is really dependent on its stars. And you also get, like... it's the most escapist you get with Hitchcock is with Grant.
Yeah.
That is the most, like, and it's the less, like, even Suspicion, as dark as it is, it still has a lightness to it.
Yeah.
And a lot of humor.
I think it just comes through Grant naturally. Is always going to be likable, and he's always going to be the guy you root for. Mm-hmm. And I think that's, too, why in Suspicion, the studio's like, no, you can't have him kill people, because, one, maybe people back then wouldn't believe it.
Is there something that you would have liked to see them do together, whether in between that time or even after North by Northwest?
I mean,
I know it's tough with Legacy, but like, go ahead and go for broke on it. Like,
Yeah,
if
I
you
mean,
could-
I always thought that he would have been great in Rear Window. Man,
do you think you would believe him not wanting to marry Grace Kelly? Actually, you would.
yeah.
Because he doesn't want that would. Oh fuck.
So there's a couple. I
Oh,
think.
can we go back and change that?
But here's the thing: is I never want to disparage Jimmy Stewart because I love Jimmy Stewart.
Yeah.
So he's amazing in the film. I can't think of a film that I think in the 4 films that he did with Hitchcock, I think is exactly what he needed to do. Because I think he was the perfect person for those roles. I don't know of another movie where he could have been
I got
that
one.
guy. Because go ahead.
Torn Curtain. It's a film with Paul Newman and Julie Andrews. It's a Hitchcock film. He originally wanted Grant for the movie, although 2 things were wrong with it. One, Grant retired, but I think Grant might have come out to do it.
He might have.
But the other issue is that Torn Curtain comes after Marnie. Marnie's not a success, so Hitchcock gets put on restraints by Universal at the time. But that's basically the end of Hitchcock and Grant. They create that mold that has delighted so many people for so many years. I want to jump in, though, really quickly. You've already kind of answered this, but you have a lot of other favorites of Grant films, obviously. And you already discussed Psycho as probably your favorite Hitchcock film. Is there any other Hitchcock film that you would recommend to somebody?
Oh, yeah. I mean, easy. I mean, if you want like a really tight moves fast, I love Dial M for Murder. Vertigo is amazing.
Yeah, Vertigo is going to be an interesting discussion when we get into it.
The Birds, like I said, is my first one.
Yeah. Which, by the way, if you watch The Birds today on Blu-ray, it doesn't. It's one of those films where the sodium pentothal process, the sodium processing for plates for special effects, it doesn't distract. Like the lines are not there.
If you're gonna have James on, and I mean Rebecca's an amazing film.
Yeah.
If you want to get some Criterions that I own that are really fun to watch because they have great things,
you go to his house.
Yeah, Foreign Correspondent is a fun one, and The Lady Vanishes is pretty good.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, I really like Hitchcock. I don't, and Spellbound. I mean, yeah. I mean, I could probably list off the top of my head 20, 30 movies of his you can watch. But, I mean, Rear Window is an amazing thing. If you ask me, I still think North by Northwest is Hitchcock's maybe best movie. I think Psycho's my favorite of his just because I like horror.
And it is the granddaddy of a lot of things that you and I both love. Like, I love Halloween. You're a Friday the 13th guy, and Friday the 13th holds lineage within Psycho to an extent.
Yeah.
It's mainly... It's funny as I think that, and I'll definitely talk more about it when I talk Psycho with my guest for that one, but Psycho, to me, it's... What's funny? How do I explain this? You remember in the Friday the 13th documentary where Sean Cunningham says, "I think the imitators did all the things I got wrong than the things I did right." Mm-hmm. I think that's how people have extrapolated Psycho to a certain extent, because Psycho inherently is not so much a horror movie as it is a thriller.
I'd say. I mean, it's literally a psychological thriller.
Yeah,
and you're dealing with someone who has mental health issues and has mommy issues, and it's so much more. I mean, it's so iconic for the shower scene, but I would say the scene beforehand where Janet Leigh is
eating,
just eating or talking to Norman Bates in his like I guess study.
Yeah,
I think his shot is maybe some of the best shots that Hitchcock's done with two people talking. And a master class on how to be an actor.
I thought you were going to say The Hole in the Wall.
No. Because it's
Ryan.
No, it's just so well done, and Anthony Perkins is so great in it. If you get past the sensationalism of the shower scene and the murders and just boil it down to a character study, I think it's an amazing film.
And it's still ambitious as heck. If you are able to walk into Psycho blank, you will be amazed by it because of what they do with Janet Leigh.
Yeah.
But also just how it's funny because I was rewatching it the other day, and I'm able to watch it in two ways. I can watch it as a person who's never heard of Psycho, and I'm able to watch it as a person who's seen Psycho 100 times. I love watching it the first way, though, because I like watching what Anthony Perkins does and suspecting him the entire time. But not suspecting him the way I would be expecting him. I suspect him as an accomplice. I don't suspect him as someone wearing mother's wig, which to me it kind of like it lays the groundwork for a lot of what we think of Hitchcock, but also what we think of horror films.
Oh, I agree, and I don't think you can't really. And the thing I like about Hitchcock, you can't really box him in somewhere.
He's kind of all over the place.
He's all over the place. It's I mean, a lot of them are thrillers or suspense. I mean, he's the master of suspense. I mean, the reason he has that, but you can deconstruct his filmography in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
I mean, To Catch a Thief doesn't really fall under any of them.
It kind of falls into comedy, which he did a few of them. He did Mr. and Mrs. Smith in 1941 with Carol Lombard, but he also does The Trouble with Harry, which, upon revisiting, I think that might be in my top 10 of Hitchcock personal because of how it is one of the Hitchcock films where Hitchcock said, like, look, what if I just put in everything I thought was fucking funny?
And it works. And that's, you can't, what's great about Hitchcock, you can't really, like, lock him down. He's going to do what he wants to do. And, Yeah.
And so we're going to do a little segment I want to try out called the Hitchcock Cameo Corner. This is a segment where I'm going to try, with the help of Ryan, to figure out what happens to the characters that Hitchcock plays in his movies. He's usually only in there for about 5 or 10 seconds, but two of the films we discussed have some of the most obvious and or famous cameos that Hitchcock ever did. The first one we'll bring up is North by Northwest, which literally has him chasing after a bus after the words directed by Alfred Hitchcock go away. Now, he misses that bus. My assumption is he got on another bus, got to an airport, and then traveled to France. He was going to go sightsee. He was going to go have some fun. And he gets on another bus. It's like a local village bus near the French Riviera. And, you know, he's thinking, like, there's no way I'm going to bump into anybody silly or any like any ad executive and whatnot. But lo and behold, he runs into that ad executive's long-lost brother, Jean Roby, on the bus. So it's basically Hitchcock went
It's all connected.
Hitchcock went from New York to France. That's the same guy on the bus. It has to be the same guy on the bus. Thus, North by Northwest is the best prequel ever made.
The original Marvel Cinematic Universe.
Exactly. The Hitchcock the Cock Cinematic Universe.
The HCU.
The HCU. I love it. I love it. Psycho is somehow connected to Mr. and Mrs. Smith through very devious ways.
Well, you could say that on Psycho with him, so he made it there, and he was trying on a cowboy hat after he after he got out of Paris, or
exactly. So he comes back home, and then he's on the way, and he's just like, I've never tried a cowboy hat before.
Yep. And there you go.
Yeah, and then there we go. Oh my god. And then
it's all connected.
He gets up the next morning, and he's just like, I'm gonna go to a bird shop and look around in a bird shop. He walks around and looks in that bird shop. He comes out with his 2 dogs as Tippi Hedren's going in. Boom. We've
all
got
connected.
This. Oh, my God. Hashtag it's all connected. Watch Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., guys, because nobody else is.
Hey-o.
Before we go, I've got 2 more questions for you.
Okay.
First is, the films we've discussed today, we've talked Suspicion, Notorious, North by Northwest, To Catch a Thief. How do we see those types of films today? How's that groundwork laid at that point?
I think those films hold up really well. I don't think there's anything really in them that makes them that dates them too much.
Do you think that we see things like within them in our of those films in our films today?
I mean, you can correlate stuff like National Treasure. I mean, it's the obvious one with North by Northwest.
Yes.
You already mentioned Ocean's 11 for To Catch a Thief. The older stuff's a little more hard. There's not too many Nazi spy thrillers anymore.
No, but I would go with Suspicion, though. There was a period in the 90s where we had a lot of sexy thrillers.
Yeah.
like thinking your man or your girl's going to kill you.
Oh, I mean, even you could. Yeah.
And Notorious, I think, the closest that I've seen to it in terms of World War II espionage, steamy, is honestly Allied from 2015.
Yeah, actually, I like Allied a lot. Maybe that's why I like it a lot.
Yeah, so like the trope is still there to this day.
Yeah.
And North by Northwest is the most obvious because of escapist fare. Like, extraordinary situations couldn't happen in a million years. Like, I mean, this is a bit of a stretch, but something like Endgame, is escapist entertainment. It does mean things and it has strong holding on solid ground. But ultimately, it is about things that don't technically happen in the real world. I don't know. Did Josh Brolin get purple recently?
Might have.
Okay, good. Well, I mean, as long as he doesn't have a glove, I think we'll be fine. And then this is the last one that has mainly just a tie to Cary Grant, because we've talked a lot about Hitchcock too, but Grant, I want to send him off on a good note. Do you think anybody could ever become as popular a star as Cary Grant was back in the day?
We already mentioned him. I think Tom Cruise. I think, because in all seriousness, I think Tom Cruise is a quintessential movie star.
Yeah.
He plays everything. Cary Grant played everything. Tom Cruise can play anything.
Right.
Whether it's, if you want to, the only thing I think Cary Grant never did was horror. So,
well, Arsenic and Old Lace isn't horror.
No, but that's like a screwball horror film, I guess.
Yeah.
But because someone who's been sustainable for so long, people who still love to go see their movies, and someone who I would say is a movie star, I'd say Tom Cruise, and who has the accolades. I mean, or you can even say someone like Tom Hanks, because Tom Hanks is a little more of the everyday man, and Tom Cruise is more of the movie star. That's why I would lean to Cruise, because he, just like Grant, I think Cruise has this unattainability to him, right? Where Grant seems like he's a really nice guy, and but there's still that aura about him that he is a superstar, and he's a movie star. Yeah. So he's unattainable to the normal person. I forget that he's dead. But
he's untouchable, but he's close to being touchable.
Yeah, and that's the thing with.
Which, by the way, that would be a terrible Brian De Palma film, but close to touchables.
That's why I think Tom Cruise in that regard, because I'm trying to think of another actor that's been sustainable and still makes good movies constantly.
And we have to keep in mind that once Tom Cruise goes, like the star system has changed drastically from what it was back then. Yeah. And today, even more so, like it's arguable that IP is the star now and not the person.
Yeah, but you need the person too, because you can. I mean, I love Robert Downey Jr. Yes, and Robert Downey Jr. could be one too, where the only thing that held Robert Downey Jr. back is he went through a tough time in his personal life, right? Where Cruise and Grant kind of worked through it. I mean, totally different. I mean, yeah, Robert Downey Jr. had addiction problems that he's really overcome, right? But you need someone who's can play anything and can carry on, and there's really not very many actors like that anymore. I mean,
the versatility factor is a little out the door in comparison, because now we know who we're grabbing for.
Because I think Tom Hanks would be more of a Jimmy Stewart type. But yeah, I would say
you can go the same darkness as Jimmy Stewart.
Yeah,
too.
And I'd say I'd stick by my Tom Cruise analogy, because they're both movie stars, both good-looking dudes. Yeah, I mean.
There you go.
Yeah.
Well, Ryan, before we go, do you want to plug anything? I think I know what the fuck you're going to plug.
You can like my podcast on Facebook, realnerdspodcast.com, isn't it? Feels weird. I'm on Real Nerds Podcast, Stitcher, iTunes, Internet, Twitter, Instagram.
And you're also writing a Family Guy article series, which
I'm still working on my Scream Factor. I keep on meaning to post the Cat People, but Corinne's been doing a really great job posting articles, and I try not to steal people's thunders like I did to you one day, and I felt really bad about it. Not stealing your thunder, but I try not to draw attention to more than like a couple articles.
Yeah, no. Here's the thing, and I think I told you this, but part of the reason we're doing this right now is because of the Clint Eastwood article series taking forever, and it became less fun over time because Clint Eastwood's hard to talk about without getting a little frustrated right now. Although they just cast that guy from Black Klansman and I, Tonya in his movie, which I think he's great casting. Yeah. But now by the time I had gotten to that article series and I was publishing on that same day, I was just like, I don't care. Like I want people to read it, but I'm also just like, look, like I'm almost done with this. I'm just happy that it's up now.
Yeah, it's because things like that, I never know what's gonna take off. Right now my Revenge of the Nerds post is super popular, and
because Revenge of the Nerds,
so something like that I think is harder to watch than Cary Grant trying to kill his wife in Suspicion.
Exactly, Revenge of the Nerds is much more problematic than Suspicion.
It's still funny, but it's
got
issues.
It's not. It's like the movie we need to talk about, Kevin. We need to talk about Revenge of the Nerds.
So yeah, just Real Nerds podcast.
Picture of Robert Carradine looking suspicious with Tilda Swinton in the background.
But from Body Bags, Robert Carradine.
Yes, exactly. Well, this has been the Shamley Silhouette. If you want more information on the Shamley Silhouette, visit realnerdspodcast.com. Look for the articles. They'll be coming out twice a month, as well as the podcast episodes. They'll be coming out twice a month. You can follow me at RealNerdZach on Instagram. And on the next episode, we don't know yet because this is the pilot, so we don't know if we're going to get picked up for series.
So, like, the set's going to change.
Exactly. And I'm going to replace. I'm going to replace Jeffrey Hunter with William Shatner.
Nice.
But we'll keep Leonard Nimoy. And also Carl Reiner won't be in it anymore. We're going to get Dick Van Dyke instead. It won't be called Head of the Family anymore. It's not going to be called the Shamley Silhouette. So yeah, but I have a feeling that the next discussion might involve Psycho. That might also be the third one. I don't know. I'm going to record some of these in advance, guys, so that way I can release them on time and not make false promises. But no promises. I work a day job, just like the gentleman in front of me.
Sometimes.
Yeah. So, but until next time, just please continue to listen. Please continue to subscribe. And with that,
subscribe to Real Nerds Podcast.
Subscribe to Real Nerds Podcast. This has been another entry in the Shamley Silhouette.
Anytime.